English step by step, past simple, step 2. In the last video, step 1, we looked at regular past tense forms, adding ed, and we looked at all the pronunciation points that are important to remember with regular forms. In this video, we'll look mainly at the irregular past tense forms. So many verbs are irregular, so they don't end in ed. Sometimes you can see patterns. So let's look at some of the most common patterns. So here we have begin, past tense, began, ring, rang, sing, sang, run, ran, drink, drank. So all of these past tenses have the same vowel. Next pattern, buy, brought. Now, there are other verbs like this, for example, fight and fought. And then sometimes the pronunciation is the same, but the spelling is different. For example, catch, caught, teach, taught. Here's another pattern with EW at the end. Grow, grew, know, knew, draw, drew. The next pattern is quite common with the O sound in the past tense irregular form. Steal, stole, wake, woke, wear, wore, write, wrote, break, broke, freeze, froze. So all of these are quite common verbs. In the next pattern, all of the verbs have T at the end. Feel, felt, burn, burnt, learn, learnt, mean, meant. Now you can see for some of them, burn and learn. You could also say burned or learned for the ending. So there are two forms and they're both correct. The next pattern has the ow sound in the past tense form. Find, found, bind, bound, grind, ground. So as you can see, sometimes you can see patterns, which makes it easier to remember them. But of course, some very common, very old verbs in English don't follow any pattern at all. Go and went, for example. Do, did. See and saw. Make and made. Say and then said. Give, gave. Eat and ate. So these are very common verbs, and it's difficult to put them into one list with one pattern. Now, some verbs don't change in the past tense. So, for example, cut, cut. You say, today I cut, last week I cut. It doesn't change. Also, put and put, hit and hit, cost, cost, fit, fit. None of these verbs change when you're talking about the past tense with past situations. So that finishes our look at the pronunciation points connected to past regular and past irregular forms. And the pronunciation is really the trickiest part of learning the past tenses, because really the forms of the past tense are very easy because they don't change very much. Let's look at what I've written here. English past tense forms and other English tense forms are easier than many other languages. Why? Because they don't change. They never change. For I, you, he, she, we, they, the form is the same. If you see here, we have I ate, you ate, he ate, she ate, we ate, and they ate. Now, with past simple, of course, there is a change in the third person. For example, I eat, you eat, she eats. So that's one point you have to remember about present simple. But in past simple, we don't have any changes with any of the people, with any of the I, you, he, she, we, and they. So, and it's the same with the negatives. I didn't eat, you didn't eat, he didn't eat, she didn't eat, etc., etc. And it's the same with the questions. You use the inversion, of course, but the form doesn't change. Did I eat? Did you eat? Did she eat? Did he eat? Etc. So, if you look at the form, you can really see that it's quite basic and quite simple. So, my advice is focus on pronunciation when you're learning and practicing the past simple, because it's easy to get into some bad pronunciation habits. So the forms are easy once you've learned the pronunciation. So that was an overview. So let's look at some specific points just to remind ourselves of the structure of the form. To make negative, we have to use the auxiliary verb did, and this is sometimes called a helping verb. We then add the negative not to the helping verb. This is then followed by the infinitive of the verb, which is the main form of the verb. For example, I ate, and then the negative is I didn't eat. Now sometimes when people are learning or practicing these, they make a mistake and say I didn't ate. But remember, didn't is the past tense form. Eat is actually the infinitive. We don't say I didn't ate. Next one, you drank, you didn't drink. He forgot, he didn't forget. Infinitive, forget. We went, we didn't go. They bought, they didn't buy. So, once you've practiced the past tense forms, the irregular past tense forms, and then once you've practiced a little bit with negatives and infinitives, it's quite easy to remember the structures. To make questions, we also use the helping verb did. As with other question forms in English, we use inversion, changing the order of the words. The verb did is also used with infinitive in questions. Okay, let's look at these examples. You understood. Did you understand? She drank coffee. Did she drink coffee? They studied English. Did they study English? Now, questions with question words also use did and the infinitive of the verb. For example, here we have question words where, what, how, and what again. Where did he go? He went to the airport. What time did the plane arrive? It arrived at about 9 a.m. How did you travel? I travelled by tram. What did you do? I did a lot of things. So remember to use did in the question forms and in the negatives. So to finish off this look at the form of the past tense verbs, we have to focus a little bit on the form of the verb to be, because the verb to be always follows its own rules in all of the tenses. So this is how it looks in past tense. The important thing, there is no did. Examples. I was happy. I wasn't happy. Question, was I happy? You were happy. You weren't happy. Were you happy? He was happy. He wasn't happy. Was he happy? She, and then we is also we were, and they is they were. So remember, I was, I wasn't, you were, you weren't, he was, he wasn't. So in this case, there are more changes with the different subjects or the different pronouns or the different nouns as subjects for each of the situations. I was, you were, he was. So this is a little bit more complicated than the normal regular verbs. So this brings us to the end of step 2, the step 2 video about past simple. So you can move on to step 3, where you'll find some practice exercises.